Welcome back. So already we have discussed power transmission systems like belt and chain. Now we are going to the third mode of power transmission, that is gear drive. So the objective of today's session is first to understand the basic concepts about gear drive. So we have to understand what you mean by gear drive, how it is made, and what of the materials it is made of, like that. After that we will go to the classification of gear drive, their merits, demerits, and their applications. So this is the only objective of today's session. So what do you mean by a gear drive? Some of you have already seen a gear inside your watch or in some other application, in some automobile animations. So gear drive is, this is a figure of a gear drive you can see here. So what do you mean by a gear drive? Gear drive is nothing but a toothed wheel used for power transmission. So we can see two circular discs are there, and on the periphery of the disc we have teeth, equal distance teeth cut on the periphery of this disc with equal width also, and they will be meshing with each other. So gears mean toothed wheel used for power transmission. And of course we can see here there is a hole at the center of these two gears, and our shaft will be connected inside this hole with the help of a key. And so one gear will be mounted on the driving shaft and another one will be mounted on the driven shaft, and their teeth will mesh with each other. So you can see in this interface between these two gears there are some teeth which are meshed together. So here you can see here some of these gears teeth are meshed together. So that is how the motion is transmitted. The gear, so one gear, suppose this is our driver gear. So inside this driver gear we will be one gear we will, this gear, suppose this is our driver gear, this gear will be connected to the driver shaft which is inserted inside the hole of this driver gear with the help of a key. So when the driver gear rotates, this gear will rotate. So already this gear is meshed with the driven gear, so it will rotate the driven gear in the same direction. And obviously we have the driven shaft at the center of the driven gear, so it will also rotate. So like that we can transmit power from one shaft to other using the gear drive. Now if you have the distance between these two shafts are very too large, suppose some meter, 3 meter or like that, we not may be able to use two gears. So in that case we have to use a number of gears known as gear trains. So if the distance between this driver shaft and driven shaft is too long, this direct meshing of two gears will not be possible, and we have to use a number of gears, and such an arrangement is known as gear train. So in the next session we will deal with the gear train separately. Now you can see the teeth of gear are either made by casting, so you can cast a gear, metal casting, use metal casting, or it can cut using machine tools like milling machine. So you can cut the gear teeth on the periphery of a metal blank with the help of a milling machine or a machine tool like that. So that is a mode of manufacturing for a gear teeth. And the advantage is we can use a large number of materials like grey iron, cast steel, alloy steel, and even non-ferrous metals like phosphor, bronze, nickel, manganese, etc. And how the selection of material will depend on so many factors like cost. So cost is one factor. Then the strength required. If we want more strength, we have to go for a better material, and corrosion resistance, etc. So which material we have to choose will depend on these factors. So we can use a wide range of material for manufacturing of gear. The basic equation of gear drive is very simple, that is the speed ratio of gear drive. that is the speed of driven gear to the speed of driver gear, is equal to the inversely proportional to the ratio of T1 and T2. So what is T1 and T2 is the number of teeth on the driver gear and driven gear. So T1 is the number of teeth in the driver gear, T2 is the number of teeth in the driven gear. So this is a simple relation used to calculate the speed ratio of a gear drive. So already we know speed ratio is the ratio of speed of driven gear to driver gear, or the driven shaft to driver shaft, N2 by N1. So it is seen that it is inversely proportional to the ratio of number of teeth of the meshing gears. So obviously if a gear is smaller, it will be rotating faster. That is the conclusion we are getting. If a gear is smaller, that means it is having less number of teeth. It will rotate more speed. And if it is having more number of teeth, it will rotate with less speed. So this is the basic equation used for finding out the speed ratio of a gear. Now we can see how classification of gears. So based on the position of axis of shaft to be connected and the position of teeth, we can classify the gear into 5 categories. What are they? We have spur gear, helical gear, bevel gear, worm gear, and finally we have rack and pinion. So we have to study these 5 gear, their advantages, disadvantages and applications. So first we will go for the spur gear. So this is a spur gear. It is the most used gear type in among all these 5 type of gears. So what is the peculiarity of these gears? You can see the shafts. The shaft will be at the center of this hole. So using spur gear, we can connect or we can transmit power between 2 parallel shafts. So spur gear is used to connect the power between 2 parallel shafts. So you can see here one shaft will be here, one shaft will be here. So both the axes are parallel. And another peculiarity is their teeth is straight and the teeth also parallel to the axis of the shaft. So here this is the one teeth of this spur gear. So that is parallel to the axis of shaft, or we can say it is perpendicular to the face of the gear. So this is the face of the gear, this face. So teeth is perpendicular to this face and parallel to the axis of the shaft. And what are the advantages of spur gear? It is a less expensive gear among all these 5 gears. So obviously it is the most generally used gear type. And it is very easy to install and very compact in nature. So these are the main advantages of spur gear. It is cheap. We can easily install it. It's less size, compact. But disadvantage is it is having less strength compared to other gears. Strength is less. So that means it can carry only less load. And it cannot be used for long distance power transmission. So if you have to connect shaft between a long distance, so as the spur gear become larger, its strength will be less. So we may not be able to convey the motion accurately. And it have a numerous applications. So in washing machine for changing different speed. So we know that washing machine the spindle will be rotating at different speed. So the connect the spindle of the washing machine drum and the motor, we are using spur gear. Metal cutting machines, and inside the clock and watch you can see a large number of spur gears made in plastic, made in metal, etc. And power plant, fuel pump, etc. So it is having a wide range of application. Now let's go to the helical gear. What is the difference here? This is a figure of helical gear. So you can see here, these are also used for connecting 2 parallel shafts. This one shaft will be here, one shaft will be here. So they are again parallel, but what is the difference compared to spur gear? Yes, the only difference is the teeth are inclined. You can see here the teeth are inclined to the axis of the shaft. So similar to spur gear, they are also used to transmit power between 2 parallel shafts. This is the main difference. But the teeth of helical gear are inclined at an angle to the axis of shaft. So they are inclined, they are not straight or they are not parallel to the axis of the shaft. And what is the advantage is that length of one teeth will be longer than that of spur gear. So that is the main difference this make. If you take one teeth of helical gear and one teeth of spur gear of same diameter, this helical gear have more length due to this inclination. So that will be having some advantages and disadvantages. What is the advantage compared to spur gear? The main advantage is since the teeth are longer, the strength is more. So the strength of helical gear is more than that of spur gear. And it have more surface of contact than the spur gear. That means it can apply more load or it can carry more load than a spur gear. So that is the main advantage of this helical gear. Since its teeth is inclined, it is having more length, so it can have more strength and area of contact between two gears are more. So it can have more load carrying capacity. So what some disadvantages are obviously expensive than spur gear. The efficiency of a helical gear is reduced due to this longer surface of contact. So that is the two limitations. So it is the advantage. So you can see here these are advantages of spur gear. Now it becomes the disadvantage of helical gear. Similarly, disadvantage of spur gear becomes the advantage of helical gear. So application they are mainly used where the strength is more important than cost, like rolling mills, printing industry, compressor, blower, etc. are also used, power industry. So these are the application of helical gear. So whenever we have to carry more load and more strength is required and cost is not a problem, we can go for helical gear. Now we have another entirely different gear, the third one, that is bevel gear. So you can see here these are two bevel gears. What is the difference compared to spur gear and helical gear? Yes, the shafts you can see here. This is the axis of one shaft going in this direction. This is another shaft vertical. So the shaft of axis of the two shafts are intersecting. They are not parallel, they are intersecting. So the bevel gear is used to transmit power between two non-parallel shafts with intersecting axis. So they have an intersecting axis. And the important thing is the teeth of this bevel gear is made on a conical surface. You can see here an imaginary cone here, the periphery of imaginary cone like this. So the teeth is cut on the periphery of that cone and each teeth is pointing towards the apex of that cone. So that is the manufacturing difference of spur gear and bevel gear. In bevel gear, these are formed on a conical surface and each teeth points towards the apex of this cone. An advantage is mainly it is the only excellent option for connecting intersecting shafts. So if you have to connect any two intersecting shafts and transmit power, the best choice is bevel gear. And disadvantage is we know that cannot be used for connecting parallel shafts. And another disadvantage is at high speed it become more noisy. So that is another disadvantage of bevel gear. And they are difficult to manufacture since we have to manufacture it on a conical surface with an inclination pointing towards the apex. So it is difficult to manufacture. So these are the disadvantages of bevel gear. So obviously cost will be higher compared to spur gear and helical gear. And the main application of bevel gear is this, you have to note it is used for the differential of automobile. So what do you mean by differential of automobile? Though most of the automobile we have a differential gear. The differential gear will be used for turning the curve. When the vehicle turns a curve, its inner wheel has to rotate or move less distance compared to the outer wheel. So the speed of outer wheel and inner wheel has to be different. So that is done by a differential gear. So the differential gear will be made of a bevel gear. Similarly, railway track inspection machine, gearbox, printing press, etc. of a printing press, etc. use this bevel gear. But the main application is the differential gear of an automobile are made of bevel gear. Now we are going to the fourth category, that is worm gear. So what is the important thing here? What about the shafts? This is one shaft, this is another shaft. So what about the axis? Yes, they are non-parallel as well as non-intersecting. So you can see here they will not intersect because they are in a different plane. So one axis, this axis of this gear is perpendicular to this board, and this axis is parallel to this x-axis. So they are a different plane, so they will not intersect, and they are non-parallel also. So worm gear is used to transmit power between non-parallel, non-intersecting shafts, and they are at right angles to each other. So generally they will be at 90 degree to each other. So you can see here this axis and this axis are at 90 degree to each other. And it consists of two gear. You can see here one is entirely different from the other. So this is known as worm. This is known as worm wheel. So worm gear consists of two gear. One is worm. This one is worm wheel. Now worm is a threaded screw like gear. So this worm gear resembles to a threaded screw, and it will be connected to the driver gear. So driver shaft, though this is our driver shaft. So the worm gear is, this is worm gear is connected to the driver shaft. And worm wheel, this is known as worm wheel, is a look like an ordinary spur gear. So we have two worm gear, means it consists of these two gears. One is a worm, looks like a threaded screw. So another one is worm wheel, which is simply another spur gear. An important feature of this worm gear is its irreversibility. What do you mean by irreversibility? It cannot be reversed. So what do you mean by that? So by rotating this worm, we can rotate this worm wheel. But the reverse is not possible. If you rotate the worm wheel, it will not rotate this worm gear. So that is known as irreversibility. So that is important feature of worm gear. So all the other gears, if you take spur gear, helical gear, bevel gear, etc., if one gear rotates, other will rotate, and the reverse is also possible. If the other gear rotate, the first gear will rotate. But here it is not possible. This is known as irreversibility. So if you can rotate the motion, that means you can transmit the motion only in this direction only. That is, by rotating the worm gear, you can rotate the worm wheel. But if you rotate the worm wheel, this worm gear, this screw like gear will not rotate. So advantage is it can tolerate very large loads, and this is the main advantage. It can use for speed reduction in the order of 100:1. So if you want to reduce the very high speed to a low speed in the range of 100:1 or 150:1 or above that, it is possible by this worm gear. So high speed reduction is possible in worm gear. And they can operate silently and smoothly compared to bevel gear and other gears. This worm gear can operate silently and smoothly. And disadvantage is transmission efficiency is low. Why transmission efficiency low is it is having high friction loss and it produces more heat. So these are the disadvantage of worm gear. Its efficiency is less. Why it is less is because of this. It generates more heat and it have high frictional loss. So its transmission efficiency will be less. The main application of worm gear is in gate control mechanism. So it can open only in one direction. So ratchet mechanism, it acts as a ratchet mechanism for gate control. So we can open the gate in one direction, but it cannot be opened in the reverse direction due to this irreversibility. An automobile steering mechanism also use this concept. Conveyors, another application. Conveyors means the belt we are used to transmit in airport, etc., for objects from one place to other, use this worm gear for speed reduction. And lift also we can use worm gear. So these are the application of worm gear. So it is entirely different compared to the 3 gears we have studied, and its important thing is its irreversibility and its high speed reduction capacity. Now move to the last type of gear, that is rack and pinion. So this is a rack and pinion gear. So what is the difference here? Yes, one gear is straight. So you can see here this is a gear with cutting on a straight line, and this is an ordinary spur gear. So this is known as rack and pinion. So rack, this gear is known as rack. The rack are straight gears connected to a spur gear known as pinion. So this is an ordinary spur gear known as pinion, and this gear is a straight gear, and this is known as a rack. And the main feature is they can use to convert rotational motion to translation motion. So if the pinion is rotating, the shaft at the center of the pinion is rotating, this pinion will rotate and it will move this rack in this translational direction, not the rotational direction. So that is the important thing of rack and pinion. The rack and pinion is used to convert rotational motion to translational motion. So advantage is very cheap and compact, and it is only gear that converts rotational motion to translation motion. So no other gear can convert a rotational motion to translation motion. They can convert only rotation to rotation, but this gear can convert rotational to translation motion. So a disadvantage is friction is more, it will be wear more. The wear and tear of this rack and pinion will be more. So therefore it will be having shorter life. So the main application was this type of gear was used in the earlier steering system of older cars. Now it is not used widely due to this shorter life and the friction. But earlier most of the automobile steering system is based on rack and pinion. And they are also used in material handling system and large robot, etc. So these are the application of rack and pinion. So this is also entirely different from the first 3 gears. So this is rack, this is pinion used to transmit rotation motion to translation motion. So with this we are stopping this classification of gear, and the next section we will deal with the gear trains and the type of gear trains. Thank you.